Welcome to the inaugural Anderson A.J. Franklin Unity Against Racism lecture. What a wonderful way to recognize, honor, and celebrate the work of Dr. A.J. Franklin, to show our appreciation, A.J., for who you are and what you do. The fundamental vision of the Institute for the Study of Race and Culture is to contribute to the disruption and undoing of racism. And we are so pleased to introduce this lecture series as a service towards that vision. Before I go ahead with my very brief welcome comments, there are a few people just to thank. First of all, I would like to recognize the pioneering work of Dr. Janet E. Helms, who started the Institute for the Study and Promotion of Race and Culture, as she named it, back in 2000, as a way to bring more focus on aspects of race and culture into psychological science and practice. In addition, there are many people to thank for their efforts in bringing this event together. I'd like to thank Dean Stanton and the Office of the Dean for their ongoing support of the Institute. Certainly, I'd love to thank Kimberly Wesley, our Institute coordinator, who works so tirelessly behind the scenes, the students of our Resist Racism research team, the audio-video support folk, thank you very much. And then the staff and faculty of the Department of Counseling, Educational and Developmental Psychology, many of whom are here this evening, so thank you for your presence. And finally, to Dr. Billy Sue and Dr. Anna Martinez-Ailman for your contribution to this evening's program. So with that out of the way, let me get to the important business of the evening, which is a celebration of Dr. Anderson J. Franklin. For those of you who have chosen to come in person and to spend this evening with us in honoring AJ, we are deeply appreciative. To those of you who are with us from all over the US and even in other parts of the world via virtual, thank you for your patience and thank you for your presence. To Nancy and AJ's family, welcome. We thank you for being here. And to AJ's friends and colleagues, welcome. Your presence is recognized and appreciated. I first came to know of AJ in the late 1990s. My wife, Portia, and I were both pursuing our PhDs at that time and were also new to the United States. Portia was pursuing clinical psychology at City College. I was pursuing counseling psychology at Teachers College, Columbia. As eager doctoral students, we attended as many professional conferences as we could. And there one would engage in discussion, typically as students, who are you working with? I recall with much fondness when Portia, with a kind of nonchalant manner, would indicate that she was working with A.J. Franklin. The response was usually something like this: "What? You are working with A.J.?" And then an accompanying look of envy. Over the years, we have both come to appreciate that those wows, to appreciate what those wows were all about. So this evening, AJ, we are here to collectively thank you for your commitment, your dedication, your mentoring, and your tireless efforts to bring more justice and equity to this world. And with those few comments aside, I'd like to turn to a little video presentation that we can collectively join and reflect on the work that AJ has done over these years.
Revealing ourselves to therapists, reveals ourselves in a way that has racial implications for us. And particularly if we're going to counselors that are not Black counselors and not Black male counselors. So we feel that you will not only misunderstand us as a man, but you will misunderstand our experiences Well, for a while, I've been talking about the sort of psychological consequences for Black men in particular that comes from the imposition of stereotypes and constantly being misrepresented and essentially made invisible by all the assumptions and presumptions that people have of us. A group of us marched on the Council of Representatives or some meeting being held by the APA Executive Board to protest the lack of representation of the Black experience in psychology and kind of shut that whole meeting down.
If we streamline the services, how policy can also be streamlined, can also be better.
And we find that that is much more effective to work as a coalition to try to address the issues of poor achievement in education, the lack of homelessness, instability of families, that working together as a coalition, as a partnership, has much better effectiveness for interventions. On February 1st, 1960, 4 students sparked the nationwide sit-in movement by sitting at the whites-only lunch counter at Woolworth store in North Carolina. They became known as the Greensboro Four. Several weeks later, on February 22nd, 1960, 34 students were arrested for trespassing at Taubheimer's department store. These students became known as the Richmond 34. I was one of them. We sparked similar sit-ins throughout the state of Virginia and in other places.
It's been nearly 6 decades since Richmond 34 challenged racism and discrimination during a peaceful protest. Recently, they realized that arrest was still on their record, but that changed today. Their case is now closed.
They used exceptional restraint to lead a peaceful protest against an evil system of bigotry and discrimination. However, they moved forward that day and made an extraordinary difference in the terms of the South segregated policies and practices.
Even in spite of the progress, that there's still many, many things that haven't changed. So the work is still there. The mantle and the torch is going to be passed.
So without further ado, I would like to invite Dr. Billy Sue, our Associate Provost for Academic Affairs, to give us the formal introduction. Thank you.
Thank you, Alex, and welcome to everyone for being here and given this opportunity to re-invite Dr. A.J. Franklin back to the Boston College community. It's wonderful to have you back. So I have some brief remarks, and if you've read the introduction that was provided in the program, much of it is lifted from there, so I apologize if you've read it already very carefully. I think certainly there's a lot here that is worth reiterating just to emphasize how much of a substantial contribution Dr. Franklin has given to society. So, as you know, Dr. Franklin is the Honorable David S. Nelson Professorial Chair Emeritus in the Carolyn A. and Peter S. Lynch School of Education at Boston College. AJ worked at Boston College from 2007 until his retirement in 2019. And after a very brief retirement, Stanton immediately wrote a letter asking that Dr. Franklin be granted this emeritus title, and it was definitely approved, in probably the shortest turnaround ever. There wasn't much convincing required to grant him this title. So, Dr. Franklin is also Professor Emeritus of Clinical and Social Personality Psychology at the City College and Graduate School of the City University of New York. And he is also an honorary professor at the Nelson Mandela University Center for the Advancement of Non-Racialism and Democracy in Port Elizabeth, South Africa. Dr. Franklin received his PhD in counseling psychology from the University of Oregon, a master's in psychology from Howard University, and a Bachelor of Arts degree from Virginia Union University. Dr. Franklin's research and scholarly interests are in the mental health and psychological well-being of people within the African American community and the African diaspora. He is the author of numerous scholarly works, including the book From Brotherhood to Manhood: How Black Men Rescue Their Relationships and Dreams from the Invisibility Syndrome, which was named to Essence Magazine's bestsellers list, by the way. He was director of the Nelson Chair Roundtable for Networking Community-Based Programs and University Community Partnerships that promoted building coalitions and strengthening ties among schools, families, and community partners engaged in out-of-school time activities to address the achievement gap and mental health of students. Dr. Franklin's career and life work has been dedicated to confronting racial injustice and promoting racial equality. He has received several commemorations for his civil rights legacy as a member of the Richmond 34, the group of 34 students who were arrested in the 1960 sit-ins that led to the desegregation in Richmond and throughout the state of Virginia. He was selected for Distinguished Alumni Recognition in the 150th anniversary of Virginia Union University, and was also selected an Outstanding Alumnus from the University of Oregon College of Education. Dr. Franklin was a founding member and past president of the New York Association of Black Psychologists, and is a past president of the Society for the Psychological Study of Ethnic and Minority Issues of the American Psychological Association. He is a fellow of the American Psychological Association and life member of the Association of Black Psychologists. Among his many accolades are the Dalmas A. Taylor Award for pioneering leadership, scholarship, and advocacy for inclusion of persons of color in higher education and psychology from the National Multicultural Conference and Summit. He also received the Janet Helms Award for mentoring and scholarship in psychology and education from the Teachers College at Columbia University, the Martin Luther King Award for scholarship, research, and service from the New York Society of Clinical Psychologists, and the Outstanding Contribution Award from the National Association of Black Social Workers. Now, I could spend half of the time we're supposed to stay here listing all his awards, so instead I'm going to stop here and just really thank Dr. Franklin for giving the inaugural lecture in his honor.
Wow, who is that person? Thank you, Billy Sue, who is one of our major leaders here, and Alex, who I've known for a long time and have been a witness to the rise of his career, and to my old friend Anna, the Associate Dean. I remember when you were not Associate Dean. And of course, I would not have the opportunity to really be here and take advantage of all of the benefits of Boston College without the support and love of my wife, Nancy. She was the one that said, you know, we can do this. By that meaning that I could come to Boston, spend, you know, the amount of time that I needed to do my work here in Boston, and at the same time get back home, and for us to spend our date night weekends before I would turn around and come right back to Boston. It's not as if she was idle. She was a full professor, distinguished professor at Rutgers, so she was a little busy. So she wasn't exactly waiting there, wanting for me to come back home. I also want to thank my family and friends who are here. I don't want to spend so much time doing that. I also want to acknowledge a special, very special privilege of recognition, which is my church, the First Baptist Church of Lincoln Gardens in New Jersey, which is a small church of around 5,000 roughly, and 10,000 or so on service online every Sunday. But my pastor of that church, the Reverend Dr. Dante Quick, came in. And to the BC faculty and colleagues I haven't seen, boy, we need to catch up. It's so great to see so many of you. And to my old research team, many of you are sitting here and have come in town. I mean, from out of town. It's really terrific to have you back here at the OK Corral, so to speak, BC Corral. And to those of you who are on virtual, attendees, I welcome all of you here at this particular occasion. I don't know if my friends in South Africa, I got emails from them saying, AJ, you do realize it's 1 or 2 in the morning that you... and I said, that's perfectly fine, but if you're really a true friend of mine, you know what I mean? We can talk this over at the next great South African wine bash that we always would have. But it's such an opportunity to be here on this important topic of unity against racism, and I add the scholarship and activism as a part of that. And I really want to share with you some of my journey and learning about being a scholar and an activist in this whole process. And I was preparing for this, and Alex was saying, we need this, we need that. I really want to thank Courtney, who pulled together that great video and pumping her with all kinds of information. And I said, I got this, I have this. She says, no problem, just send it. And she put together a really, really, I think, terrific video. And I really am much appreciative, Courtney, of the work that you did. And I was, sorting through what I was going to say and reading this and digital files here, getting on BC Library, logging in, logging off. And then I came across, an interesting article, and I just want to share some of the opening lines of this article. It said, it is a foregone conclusion that a Black student who intends to be a professional counselor in the Black community faces the dilemma of making his graduate education relevant to his community needs. As with his prior college experience, he finds little information that will assist him in dealing with the problems facing his people. For the most part, he must translate on his own his professional knowledge into the common experiences of the Black man. I thought that was an interesting introduction. The article was to be young, gifted, and Black with inappropriate training, a critique of counseling psychology programs. And it was in the 1971 Counseling Psychologist, written by Anderson J. Franklin. And that was one of my first contributions to the profession. I started writing that as I was writing my dissertation. And upon graduation, getting my doctorate, I became an expatriate and I left for Nigeria, and I was in Nigeria continuing to work on this. And then, as we all know, in the publish or perish process, it took a little while for this article to come out. But I thought it was interesting because it was what I call another booster rocket in my career, with the Richmond 34 certainly launching my career in civil rights and in social justice. So I want to share some thoughts with you about this journey of mine and this whole quest for unity against racism, learning that I had to work with others in order to be a success in dealing with racism. So I want to share at least 3 things in general. One is confronting racism requires unification of our efforts, and that more of our scholarship in the university can be in service of anti-racism. And there needs to be, third, a greater translation of our scholarship into community service, into development, into intervention, into anti-racist public policies. We have a role to play as academic and as university scholars and as an institution in this enterprise. So let's be clear, racism is real. Confronting racism requires a unification of efforts. Racism is a virus in humanity. It is destructive, toxic, enduring. It's mutating virus. You know, you just think of COVID-19 and all that we've been through and that whole process. Racism is that way. It promotes hatred and intolerance of people who are different. It divides people and manipulates beliefs. It creates inequities and disparities in our communities. It discriminates, but it's not discriminating. Any group is at risk. Just hang around history long enough, and your comfort zone in one group may be ripped away by another group who sees your group as a threat or unacceptable in some way. So don't get too comfortable and allow racism to continue its existence and its manifestation in our individual lives. Racism is in our institutions. Racism is part of culture, values towards art, values towards religion, values towards many of the things that we just assume is natural. It is a domestic as well as a global phenomenon. I mean, one of the great experiences I had, and I could see my family saying, my wife saying, uh-oh, here we go into Mississippi storytelling. So here's my Mississippi family cousin who made it here. Here he goes. But, you know, one of the great experiences of my life in 2001 was being an official delegate at the United Nations World Conference Against Racism. And we spent weeks, literally weeks, moving around 4 different hotels and other places, just trying to get the 185 some odd member states to insert in the document, you know, in the declaration and the program of action, just to insert such things as, hey, health and mental health has outcomes from racism. So if, as a member state in the world, you're going to talk about economic and political factors that contribute to racism, health and mental health is also consequential in this virus called racism. So it was, you know, extremely important that we became very close as delegates. It's not as if we didn't know each other. We did, because we were all in this early career journey. Right? And we all ended up continuing in this early career journey. In fact, one of the delegates, a good friend of mine, who went on like me, you know, becoming presidents of different divisions within the society. She's now president of the American Psychological Association, Tamar Bryant. You know, and I know her when, but she was a part of this network of scholar activists. You know. So I want to have us understand that being a scholar activist requires balancing demands. It means demands from the university, as we know well, the publishing parish, but also can you sit on this committee? Or can you come and at least speak here on campus for this or for that? Or can you sit in on this particular task force? There are demands that are natural demands within the university structure. But we also, as professionals, are asked to be a part of the profession. Outside of the university, participate in professional organizations at the local, state, and national, and even international level. So there are these demands upon the scholar activists. There is also the community. And the community says, you know, if we sent you to school, you know, literally and figuratively, you got to give something back, you know. And this is the way in which you can do it, you know. And don't think, you know, you're not too big for your britches, if you understand what I mean. You know, you got all that PhD stuff, but here's the local community, and we speak on a very different language, and I know you know that language, in spite of the fact that you've gotten this education. So come on back. And then we also have the expectations from being a father, a husband, and a cousin. So in this quest for unity against racism, it involves a major effort for a major goal and enterprise. And that's what I want to underscore, that we need to bring more scholarship into this enterprise called Unity Against Racism. It requires not only support, but cultivation. Support for scholars, particularly scholars of color, whose work and career is in the service of anti-racism. As an institution, recognize the balancing act for the scholar activists. Transform, for example, the promotion and tenure process to accept anti-racism scholarship and community service. Now, I say this in terms of just witnessing in the early years of our writing. We couldn't get published. If we wrote about the lived experiences of Black people from a psychological perspective, still learning as early career person, you know, how do we conceptualize, for example, the invisibility syndrome, which I wrote about? How do I take what I see, what's happening to our young Black men who are targeted by police, who are not seen as a person, their authentic self, but seen as this scary person, and get shot, pushed over, hands? You know, what do I do as a scholar to interpret not only that experience, but also the psychological impact upon that person? At the same time, I'm trying to promote unity against racism. And so I'm looking for establishing the interdisciplinary work that helps to promote racism cross disciplines. And it becomes extremely important, as well as to develop resources and funding to support the research that we want to do. Because in the same way that our publications were not accepted, our proposal for grants were not accepted, if we are laying out a conceptual framework that challenges the system in some way or another, our funders, both at the federal as well as at the private and foundational level, would say, you know, that's interesting, but we really don't fund that kind of stuff. And so we are now out on our own, trying to raise money, coming out of our pockets for some of us, in order to do some research to not only satisfy the university requirements, but also satisfy our commitment against racism. And so the university has a responsibility, if it so chooses, to help create these spaces for dialogue and collaboration among scholars of anti-racist research and community service, help promote university and community partnerships. Help us in our juggling of all of these demands. And for me, it was just as an example of some things that I went through in my career. You know, I say that the Richmond 34 launched my social activism as such, gave my mother a heart attack. She called my brother, who was also at Virginia Union, and said, "Have you seen your brother?" Because it was on the news. "Have you seen your brother?" He said, "No, I haven't seen him. I guess he's all right." Of course, I was in jail. And she said, "Well, you know, I see all of this going on in Richmond. Are you sure he's all right?" He said, "Well, why do you ask?" I said, "Well, you know your brother." And at that time, he didn't know that I was in jail. But the fact is that the actual platform that launched me was my family and my family legacy in activism. My father was an activist minister in Brooklyn. He was part of a collection of ministers in which Branch Rickey of the Brooklyn Dodgers approached and say, "Could you help Jackie and Rachel Robinson settle?" So I grew up around Jackie and Rachel Robinson in the early years, and I have memorabilia, I think, somewhere, but I have certainly memories of Jackie and Rachel Robinson. And there were times in which my father also invited Martin Luther King Jr. to the church and helped raise money in support of the Montgomery bus boycott. So my mother and father were part of activist ministers in the community. In fact, it was an interesting experience Christmas. I was in Atlanta visiting our oldest son and his family. And so he comes sauntering into the kitchen. He says, "Hey, Dad, you know what this is?" He throws this old black wallet on the table. And I looked at it and I said, "You know, that kind of looks familiar." You know, and I picked it up and it opened it up. And he had my father's wallet, his grandfather's wallet. And inside of it was not only my father's picture, but his gold badge as the first black chaplain in the correctional system in New York City. So he set a mean standard, you know, and so Richmond 34 was just launching off of that family platform of community activism and living in the bubble of a very prominent minister domestically as well as internationally. So that experience, along with working at City University of New York and being a part of the Psychological Center, which is a PhD program, was our clinic. And we were in Central Harlem, Washington Heights. We saw all of the families and the children in Harlem every day that that center was open. The students were working as therapists, and we got an education about the concerns of families and children in Harlem every day. And the City College was reflective of the immigrant population in New York City. It was highly diverse, 80% of the student population. We receive those students from campus in the Psychological Center. And the more we worked there, and the more I experienced with supervision and then working with groups in private practice, you know, it became clear that, you know, for me, working with Black men and Black youth, that this whole burden of carrying, you know, this misrepresentation, all the time I walk down the street and they don't see me, they see this black thug, And, you know, I'm trying to stay on track here, but well, I'm here comes Mississippi again. So, you know, I just got a text from my mentee, one of my mentees that I share with others, and he was, you know, celebrating what's happened here today, and he's got a new book out on something about murder. I don't know the exact title, but he's been working with gangs, and he works with street gangs, and he used that as his dissertation. He's created a whole career around working with kids. And the funny thing about him, you know, he would come to the graduate center, and the security would call up and say, you know, we have this strange young man down here, you know, and he looks like a thug. And he says, he's one of your doc students. And I said, okay, I know who you're talking about. That is true. And then when he did his dissertation, he recruited kids from the hood to be interviewers for him, so that to learn better about street life. And that's what his research is. Now, he had difficulty getting people to be responsive to his type of research. And the way that he did research, being immersed in the community, both himself and with the kids in it. So he just came out with his first book, but he also told me that his research and model of working with kids now has him in 4 different cities. He's got major grants, and he's now this little thug that the security guy talked about. You know, invisible about his real competencies is a full professor doing trailblazing research. And so the impact of stereotypes upon us and upon our black men in particular make us invisible, and there are consequences to it. And I'm still learning how to write about this, you know, and it is still a challenge. But in the process, you know, the people were also, people meaning that leaders in the community wanted you to do this and wanted you to do that, and then next thing I knew, I was president of this and I'm leading that, and next thing I knew, I was on the board of psychologists, and they said that's important because not many psychologists are getting licensed in New York State. And then the community said, oh, by the way, you know, can you be a part of the board of trustees in Harlem? It's arranged by ministers. We know your father was a great minister. How could you refuse us? You know? And so next thing I know, I'm on Harlem Interfaith Counseling Service that was organized by a group of churches and ministers in Harlem, and off and running. And then there are public officials that say, oh, I heard from somebody, Pastor so-and-so in the community, and they said you would be a good person to sit on this task force for the borough of New York City. What, you know? And then the next thing I know, that, you know, the commissioner of mental health is calling me up and saying, you know, you need to be on this task force. I said, well, you know, I'm on a whole lot of things. I said, but AJ, you really, really are needed on this work. And so this balancing, this is what I'm getting back to, balancing, and in what way can an institution help us, scholar activists, achieve that? So we have purpose-driven research to address community needs, and we're trying to translate our scholarship, and we're trying to generate data to provide you know, the nation and various agencies with real information about the African-American community. And I remember my good buddy, the late Dr. James Jackson at University of Michigan. I miss him a lot. You know, we used to sit around in our early careers, and he says, AJ, this is what I'm going to do. And he was visioning, but we were all visioning then. I was saving the world, he was saving the world. And he said, I want to create this program that generates solid information on the black community. I want to create the first black representative sample nationwide of black people so that we can go and survey and generate information and be a site where we can train undergraduates with these data, graduate students, postdocs. I was a postdoc at Michigan working at that program for research on Black Americans. It's still going 40 some odd years later. It has generated tremendous amount of research data. You can look it up online. They're cheering me on. So welcome to my Michigan family. But it is 40 years of tremendous amount of research. So when I got to Boston College, it became an opportunity, and I really am appreciative of having the Honorable David S. Nelson Professional Chair here, because it gave me an opportunity not only to meet and work with some wonderful colleagues and my great students, of course, my team, on this project, the Roundtable. And the Roundtable was created and envisioned by me as a space where it could bring leaders of diverse community-based organizations, churches, school and after-school programs, health. We've even had the police in here, and we had the mayor's office. And it was a way of bringing everybody together, embracing this collective impact model, meaning that, in other words, all of us and these entities could find ways of jointly solving problems. We would have better outcomes than single-handedly, impact by ourselves in this silo operation, as I talk about. And so we worked with the Dudley Street Neighborhood Initiative. Those of you who know Boston know that community organization for many, many, many years. We brought in hundreds of organizations. My partner in crime is here, who was director of Boston Promise. And I think, and we think, we did a lot of good work in mobilizing organizations together. We were fortunate at this time, over the 12 years I was here, to have programs to come in from Trinidad and Tobago, a young, energetic cardiac surgeon who I kept asking. He came here about 3 or 4 times. He said, I've heard about this roundtable in Jamaica, and I want to take it back to Trinidad. And when he would come here, I always say, do you have coverage? You're supposed to be in surgery. He says, no, I got coverage. I'm going, I'll get back. And actually, he just texted me. He said, AJ, I thought I could make it, but my plane is stuck in New York. So he was coming up, from Trinidad. And he started the East Port of Spain initiative. And that little video clip on there was, we got on national radio. In Bermuda, became a part of the Roundtable Project. Jamaica, Caribbean Male Action Network. And of course, South Africa, Nelson Mandela University, for many, many years with the center, as well as with the Faculty of Education. That's like a second home to me now. And the Vice Chancellor there has created what she calls hubs of convergence. She just made a major speech in her second term there as of the university to organize the faculties across the university to begin to mobilize their resources and use their resources for the community at large. Actually, one of the campuses of Nelson Mandela University is based in Mission Vale, which is one of the communities there. So, some final thoughts here. The university must be an agent in unity against racism. It must support faculty of color who are engaged in this activist scholarly research. We must create the spaces to promote this kind of work. And we have to build the capacity to translate this work, this scholarship, into community interventions. And we must have community dialogue in this enterprise. Some words of wisdom that were given to me and from me to those of you who are in your different stages of early career. I don't consider myself at the end of my career, and my lovely, adorable teammates there, that they said, you hadn't stopped working. I know you hadn't stopped working. And so here are some words of wisdom that I picked up on the way that I want to share with you. First is fighting racism is a marathon. It's not a sprint. and every battle cannot be won. Stay focused on the war of racism. Believe in yourself and your vision and your personal dream. And remember that each chapter, each day is only a chapter in life, and the book of life has many chapters until you finish. As the great gospel singer, Mahalia Jackson, used to sing, and I remember it fondly, not only for her, and it's on YouTube if you want to hear her sing it, but my mother used to sing this as one of the solos in church. If I can help somebody as I pass along, then my living will not be in vain. And as I've said to many of my men that I work with and in the men's group, it's not what you do one time, but over time that defines you. So my hopes for this Anderson A.J. Franklin Unity Against Racism lectures is that this annual event is part of connective tissue to a larger body of Boston College activities and structures promoting scholarship and community engagement that unifies us against racism. That this annual event will serve as a platform for scholars to represent the evolution of their scholarship and their commitment as an activist against racism and the challenge they have of balancing the unique demands from the university and community scholarship and managing interventions. That this event can identify persons from the public and private sectors of the community that can represent ways and means to have partnerships with them toward a collective impact on consequences. So I pass the torch, guys, and mantle to the next generation. I'm looking at my grandson. Keep mentoring our students and early career faculty scholars, activists, and community partners towards a goal of unity against racism. A great man, Dr. Benjamin E. Mays, who, yes, was at my father's church, raising money, and was a friend of my father, said, "It must be borne in mind that tragedy in life doesn't lie in not reaching your goal. The tragedy lies in having no goal to reach." Thank you so much for this great honor, Boston College, and my family and friends here. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
There we go. I will start that again by saying thank you, AJ. I've asked Dr. Anna Martinez-Eilman just to share some closing remarks, and then I'm going to invite all of you to join us down in the rotunda where we can have a reception, we can have some chatting, and you can connect with AJ even further. Thanks, Anna.
Thank you. I am very well aware that I am what stands between you and the likely bar downstairs. So, but I don't want to miss out on this opportunity. From a personal position, I just want to say to you, AJ, that I fondly recall that first time I heard you speak. I was new to BC, and you said something, and I said, oh, dude's from Brooklyn. As someone who grew up there, I was like, okay, I can make it here. In any case, but the more important thing is to, as certainly as Billy has said, and certainly as Alex has said, is that what's very clear to all of us is we are far better and richer because of AJ here at Boston College and elsewhere, and that goes unspoken. What I do want to underscore, however, is the message. There are many messages that he has given us, but especially those that I want to underscore today, because I think that right now, this call that he has put out to us to unify activism and scholarship shouldn't be taken lightly. In fact, I think it couldn't be more urgent. Right now, one of the many things that we're experiencing in the world, but especially in the United States, and certainly within the higher education landscape, is this now perpetuation of these mythic narratives of racial neutrality and colorblindness. They're everywhere. They're certainly in the clinical fields. They're certainly in education. I think that if you live in the states, in certain states that have now decided that history is what history shouldn't be, you're experiencing it face-to-face every day in the schoolyard, in the school classrooms, and if you're a teacher there and or a clinician, you're feeling it very, very deeply. For us in higher education, we really, really see it with what will likely be the demise of affirmative action in undergraduate and graduate admissions with the Supreme Court case. And the reason why that I think is very indicative of this myth, this fiction, this fictional narrative that's being perpetrated about race neutrality and colorblindness as the virtue of democratic states, certainly under the 14th Amendment, which is being misread, is in fact that that narrative undermines exactly what AJ wants us to continue to bring to the fore. And that's the power of bringing visibility to the lived experience. The arguments, for example, in the University of North Carolina case that's up before the Supreme Court, if you get a chance, YouTube Justice Jackson's questions, Ketanji Jackson's questioning around here, and she gives a very, very, very eloquent line of questioning around the fact that inequity in a system like higher education or governance, is about the respect for identity. And then the absence of that really, for example, in this particular case, applicants to the University of North Carolina or Harvard, is about limiting the expression of their lived experience in the selection process. That is very telling of our time, right? Because part of the pernicious nature of this narrative of colorblindness and racial neutrality is that we want to erase the very experiences that we're meant to bring to the fore. So with our scholarship and our activism, I think that's the way to really, really take to heart the central message that AJ has always brought to us, but I think really drove home today. I want to take this opportunity to thank you again. When I think about my own scholarship, that certainly is the central piece of it. How is it that we can bring the lived experience of, in my particular case, students of color, to bear on these systems, in fact, because they define those systems. So AJ, on behalf of everyone at the Lynch School and everyone at Boston College, it's very hard to say Boston now, but thank you so very much. We are just so much the richer because of you. Thank you.